The art in this building is significant because it all represents something about Ohio history, which is not usual for a public building. They have this much art, for one thing, with the original construction of the building, design as part of the building, and then to reflect so much of the history of the state or the community in which the building is situated. So we're very fortunate to be in this building. I'm going to talk very briefly. I attended a session last September in Georgetown. It was sponsored by Justice Breyer of the U.S. Supreme Court and former Justice O'Connor, Senator Day O'Connor, who had just retired, and both concerned about preserving the independence, the impartiality of our courts in this country against, somewhat against attacks on the courts, because some people don't like decisions that come from the courts. They're trying to change. Some instances they're trying to change actually the structure of the courts. Well, they had a conference in which about 100 people were there, and all sort of representing lawyers, judges, the public generally. And as a conference like that does, the members rated the set of priority on recommendations on what should be done to help people understand the court system in this country. And the number one priority was civic education, that most citizens simply do not know what the courts are supposed to do. They have a general idea, but oftentimes their expectations are unreal, and many citizens don't. You probably know today, have a better understanding of of the role of courts in our constitutional democracy than the majority of citizens. And one reason for that is that we understand that in many, many schools today, civics courses simply are not teaching much about government and the basic fundamentals of our government, the great debates about what kind of government we should have when the founders were drafting the Constitution and the state constitution. So your interest in this area and your commitment to participate in the congressional program is very, very important. It's very significant. It's more than just a few of you students who are interested in perhaps in government or learning more about government. It has an impact. Hopefully it will have a ripple effect, an impact on your communities as you become adults and become active in your communities. You will know more about democracy and with all of its positive points and its imperfections than most people. So I'll just say briefly, and I think you probably already know this, but in this country our courts are generally 3 tiers, whether it's the federal system or the state system, the trial court, usually an intermediate court of appeals, and then a Supreme Court, the court of last resort. Intermediate court of appeals is simply our guarantee in our constitutional democracy, and everyone who loses in a trial court has one right of appeal. They can appeal whether it's a traffic case, simple traffic case, or if it's a complicated contracts case or whatever. They can appeal that to the Court of Appeals. From there, if they lose, they can ask the Supreme Court, or the highest court of the state, to accept their case and review it on the merits. And the test there is there needs to be either a constitutional issue or the death penalty case, for example. But otherwise, it's a case in which 4 judges of the court decide there's an issue here, a public interest, an issue, a legal issue that's likely to arise again. And so the court will accept that case and review it on the merits and write a decision that gives direction to judges and lawyers and everyone else as to what the law is on that issue. It's pretty simply stated. It's a little more complicated than that in operation, obviously. But that's our system, and it's different than many civilized countries. It's different than Western European countries, for instance, in some ways. In those countries, judges begin their career knowing that they're going to be a judge, and so they begin a sort of a judicial track, and they'll start out in a court as a magistrate and then move their way up into judgeships. In this country, we don't have that tradition. And so in Ohio, all of our judges are elected in general elections. If there's a vacancy, the governor appoints a person to that vacancy without the advice of the Senate. So it's a very important power that the governor in this state has. And with that, I'm going to stop because I'll keep talking. And I know you have questions.
Did you grow up in Ohio?
I did, up in Lake Erie and Sandusky. Yes.
What made you want to become a judge?
I liked the process of, I was an appellate lawyer, did quite a bit of appellate work before I came, before I went to the bench, and I liked the process of, then I liked the process of arguing a case, but I really liked the process of hearing arguments and deciding between the two arguments, weighing the issues and making a decision. And it's really enjoyable when you have 6 other colleagues with whom you work and you know, get their ideas and their views. So an appellate court is really it's really a privilege to be on an appellate court. Yes, sir.
Ma'am.
Ma'am, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I was wondering, like, if you have a rush or something, like about how you give and be in here, you're hearing types of like cases and stuff like that.
A rush, a high, like you mean? Well, it's. I wouldn't describe it as that, but as I say, it's a very high privilege to be on a court of last resort and to have the impact on the jurisprudence, the law of the state, and one gets a great deal of satisfaction from that. We don't go skipping through the halls here, but we do have a good time. We joke with each other. If you were allowed in one of our conferences where we're debating the issues and deciding a case, I think you'd be impressed with the quality of the discussion. The fact that we have a fair amount of humor. We're not jocular, but humor is a great tension breaker. And to that extent, that's not a high, but it's an atmosphere in which we work, which is very important. It's a greatly satisfying job. Yes.
I know you mentioned that there are several groups that are pushing for reform in our court systems. I really would kind of like to hear your opinion on your personal, how much faith you have in our current system and your outlook on, let's say, the longevity of our current system. The fault in our current system in Ohio, the major fault, is that we elect all of our judges, in my opinion. It's a fault. Not at the trial level, but at the Supreme Court level. We should change the system, and some of us have been working to change the system for years. Obviously, we haven't been successful. It means amending the Constitution to provide a system. In my view, an ideal system would be where, actually, it's what the governor has adopted for filling a vacancy. He has a very diverse committee that reviews the qualifications of those who want to be appointed to a vacancy, and then they recommend 3 names to him, and he selects one of the names. Now, if you carry that out, and what a number of states do then is where the governor appoints the person, then sits for usually a couple of years in the court, and then they run on their record in a so-called retention election. And what that does is it takes most of the money, most of the fundraising out of the selection of judges, which we desperately need to do in Ohio, and we can't do under the current system. Other than that, we have a very strong system. We're fortunate that even in that system, we produce highly competent judges, lawyers who want to be judges. Not enough. I mean, not enough of the highly competent lawyers who want to be judges in that system. But we're a big state, and so we're fortunate that we have good judges. Otherwise, our system is very strong. The General Assembly supports us with funding, adequate funding, and we're able to adopt programs that help all of the courts. And so our system is strong, except for the selection process of the judges of the Supreme Court.